Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Inside the Pigskin. My name is Scott Morgan, the Motor City Madmouth, and I am glad to be joined by Steve Balestrieri. Welcome, Steve.
It's great to be here on Radio Row from home.
You got it. Eric Katz is back. Of course, a long time no see, Eric. All you did was appear on the baseball show last night.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, and Mel Farr Jr. What can I tell you? Glad to have you back as well.
Great to be back. I appreciate it.
All right, just Inside the Pigskin can be heard on Spreaker as well as seen on our YouTube channel, South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. So if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? We have a lot of great content on there. I'm also getting a lot of good stuff from the Super Bowl. And just to give you guys an idea, what I've been doing the last couple of days is you talk about my football itinerary. Okay, I've been part of a lot of these media availabilities. And in the last 2 days, I sat in on Joe Burrow of the Bengals, okay, Jonah Williams, Zach Taylor, Sean McVay, Matt Stafford, A'Shawn Robinson, Eric Yarber, the wide receivers coach. Actually sat in on a couple of Staffords as well as Joe Burrows. And of course, yesterday, Al Golden. We had the good fortune of talking Jonah Williams, A'Shawn Robinson, Eric Yarber, and Al Golden. So to be a part of Super Bowl media availability has really been a lot of fun since we have a great matchup between the Rams and the Bengals. With that said, though, why am I wearing a Jacksonville Jaguars hat tonight? Well, folks, we are going to be talking all show long about the Jacksonville Jaguars and why Doug Pederson was hired. And he was their first candidate and obviously turned out to be their last. Just to give you a little bit of an overview on the situation, Urban Meyer was fired on December 16, 2021. And as it turns out, Doug Pederson was the first candidate, and then he turned out to be the last. I know that there were a lot of names that shuffled in and out of Northern Florida for interviews, as many as Byron Leftwich interviewed for the job, but I know he took himself out of candidacy. I know from what I've heard, he wanted a personnel guy out of the Arizona, and a lot of people were reluctant to work with Trent Baalke. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about Trent Baalke outside of the fact that I know that a lot of people were not really enthusiastic about working with him. But in the end, tonight's show solely focuses on Doug Pederson and the state of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Before we go any further, I just want to go and give everybody an overview about the Jacksonville Jaguars. A record over the past 10 years, they have one of the worst winning percentage in the four major U.S. sports. In the past 10 years, at 42 wins and 119 losses. And to show you how high the bar really is there, Doug Pederson will only need 3 wins to move into 5th place. I repeat, 5th place on the Jags all-time winning list, replacing, which obviously, when you look at that list, he would replace Urban Meyer, who, by the way, had all of 2 wins. So I'm going to go over some records here with the Jaguars coaches, and then we're going to bring this thing into perspective and get some opinions on this. First of all, Tom Coughlin was the only one that had a winning record there. 68-60 took the Jaguars to the AFC Championship game as a 531 record. Jack Del Rio actually wasn't bad. 68 wins, 71 losses, 489 winning percentage. Doug Marrone, who actually took the Jaguars to the AFC title game a few years back, was 23-43, 348 winning percentage. Gus Bradley was 14-48, 226. We're getting bigger, aren't we, guys? Okay. And then, of course, Mel Tucker was 2-3 on an interim basis with a 400 winning percentage. Mike Mularkey was 2-14 with a 125 winning percentage. And then you have Urban Meyer at 154 with a 2-11 mark. And Darrell Bevel, the interim guy, 1-3 with a 250 winning percentage. And of course, there's Doug Pederson. So we are setting the bar high, aren't we? So I mentioned Trent Baalke for a moment, and I have a feeling the Jaguars will be interviewing another person or two for executive roles. Nothing's been released yet, so I'm not going to get ahead of myself. But when you think about it, okay, when we set the bar high for Doug Pederson, he'd get a statue just for getting the Jaguars to the Super Bowl outside of TIAA Bank Field, considering things are so high there. And I remember, okay, that the last time when he was in Philadelphia, he ended up coaching Carson Wentz. And how did that work out? Carson Wentz gets shipped over to Indianapolis. They don't even make the playoffs. And Doug Pederson is taking the year off. So and of course now Carson Wentz's job is in jeopardy. So let me break down a few more numbers and then we're going to go from there. As I mentioned, he was the first candidate to interview for the job. He had 3 playoff appearances in 5 seasons. He was fired after a 4-11-1 mark in 2020, but he inherits Trevor Lawrence, who had 3,641 yards, 12 touchdowns against 17 interceptions, and a league worst 14.9 points per game. But as I mentioned to you folks, okay, out here that are listening and watching, the franchise is 7-7 in the playoffs with 2 AFC title game appearances. Okay, Steve Balestrieri, what are your thoughts about the Doug Pederson hiring?
I thought it was a fairly well thought out hiring because of the fact that, Peterson played in the NFL for 13 years as a, backup quarterback, but he was still involved. He was Brett Favre's backup for a number of years. So he knows the game from that perspective. So when you're dealing with a young quarterback like Trevor Lawrence, I think that's a good guy to have on the sideline. I think he's a good coach. I don't think he's a great coach. I honestly was looking forward to Jacksonville bringing back Byron Leftwich, who I thought he would have been a better hire for Lawrence. I just had that feeling that, if you bring in Leftwich, who did a lot of really good things in Tampa Bay, then, I think he'd have gotten more out of Lawrence, honestly. I really think that. But, like, as you said earlier in the show there, that, he couldn't work with the guy that's in there now. And, eventually, whether Peterson is successful or fails, well, a lot of it will have to do with Balky and how well they can work around him, I think. But I think Peterson's a good hire. I don't think it was a great hire.
That's fair. Eric?
I think it was a good hire. I mean, you got a guy who won a Super Bowl with the Philadelphia Eagles with a backup, no less, in Nick Foles. He had Carson Wentz play. I mean, we can all have our theories about Frank Wright and everyone else involved, but fact of the matter was he was the guy at the controls when Carson Wentz, who probably would have won an MVP that year had he not gotten injured. And also he took the Eagles to the playoffs after that. He made the Eagles the most consistent they've ever been since Andy Reid. And the Eagles had gone through a stretch period under Chip Kelly where they eventually became a horror movie. More than what they were a little bit at parts of this year now. But he's proven he can work with young quarterbacks. He worked with Howie Roseman, who's probably the most toxic individual in an NFL front office. And they did pretty well together. It was just toward the end that Doug just didn't feel like putting up with Howie anymore and whatever he wanted. And so, he had kind of had a raw deal there by having to play Carson Wentz instead of Jalen Hurts, which granted, toward the end, he kind of put that on himself too. But, but the fact of the matter remains, I think it's a good hire. It stabilizes the franchise. Here's a guy who comes in with a resume of success. And, Balky's the big question mark there. But I think if anybody's able to kind of at least stabilize the place and remove that cloud that's plaguing the organization, have to be Doug Pederson.
Mel?
I think they went with the safe hire. I think after going after Urban Meyer, I think he wanted to get somebody who had some coaching experience. So, quote unquote, a made man, somebody who has been successful in the league. I don't know what happened with Doug Pederson in Philadelphia. I was kind of surprised that he was let go, but I guess there was something, with Carson Wentz, maybe. I don't know exactly what went on as to how he ended up losing his job there. So I think he went with the safe hire. I would have liked to see Byron Leftwich get the job with the right set of circumstances. I understand that Trent Baalke was an issue for him, and that's why he didn't take the job. So I'm glad he just didn't take a job just to take a job and, end up over there and, end up costing himself maybe another opportunity. Just wait for the right opportunity to come across, because next year there's going to be anywhere between 4, 6, 8 jobs that are going to come available again next year. So I think he went with the safe hire after blowing up in making himself look like a fool with the Urban Meyer hire and giving Urban the type of control that he gave him. I think they took their time. They put some structure in place. They're going to have more than one person that's going to be making the decision. Urban Meyer was really the main decision maker. I mean, I guess that was a big deal for him in taking the job. But I mean, I liked what Doug Pederson did in Philadelphia. Obviously, he was able to get a lot done with Carson Wentz. He was also able to get a lot done with Nick Foles. I think it's good for Trevor Lawrence that he has an offensive-minded coach and a coach who's played the position in the league and played for a long time. So I think that's gonna work out well for him. Urban, even though he's had some dynamic quarterbacks that he's coached, I can't really say that he's really an offensive-minded coach or really quarterback-friendly coach that's really going to look. Although, I mean, he did a great job. I mean, he had a bunch of quarterbacks at Ohio State that he did a great job with. Obviously he had Tim Tebow, Chris Leak. They did a great job there, won a lot of ball games. So I don't know. Urban, I don't really think Urban, I don't know what Urban was doing, but for the people in Jacksonville, I think they needed somebody who was a known commodity, who was well known in the NFL circles. And I think he made a very conservative hire. There's a time when playing the Jacksonville Jaguars, when Jack Del Rio was the coach. I mean, you were in for a dogfight. They were pretty good teams back then. I mean, they played defense. They played very good defense. They hit you in the mouth. It was going to be a dogfight. So it'll be interesting to see what Jacksonville is going to look like this coming year. And, I think that they will be competitive. They have to get active probably in the free agent market, draft well. I mean, they do have a quarterback, so that's one thing they don't have to worry about. Now they can just put pieces around him and build around him. I mean, you look what Cincinnati's done. A couple of years ago, I think, obviously a couple of years ago when they drafted Joe Burrow, they had the number one overall pick, and look where they are in 2 years now. So you never know what's going to happen in 2 years. 2 years from now, put the right pieces around the guy, make sure you protect him, get him some weapons, play some decent defense. And this is the time to really take advantage of this opportunity because you got him on the cheap right now.
Well, another thing that needs to be brought out here too is when they drafted Jalen Hurts, remember Carson Wentz was injury prone. So you needed a solid quarterback to spell him. You can't have your starting quarterback go down and all of a sudden you don't have a suitable replacement. And then you put Jalen Hurts in there, who has some pretty good skills and fits a prototypical athletic quarterback that we're seeing. And then there's competition there. And poor Carson couldn't handle competition. Big deal. But the whole idea is you're one losing season away from losing your job these days. As it's funny, I've watched Zach Taylor at some of these media availabilities in the Super Bowl, and he's thankful that Browns were patient enough to give him a chance to make it to year 3. So I think the thing that Trevor Lawrence knows, and he's already mentioned it in public, is how often can you go ahead and work with, like you said, Mel, a guy that's played the position for a long time, much less won a Super Bowl. You got two things working heavily in your favor there. I mean, if that isn't instant credibility, I don't know what the word definition does mean, Steve. Instant credibility. A guy that played the position, won a Super Bowl.
Yeah, go ahead.
Urban Meyer, I'm going to disagree with you, Mel. Urban Meyer is not a QB developer. Urban Meyer was a run the ball kind of guy. He had at Ohio State, he had Ezekiel Elliott. At Florida, I can't remember who he had, but they were a run the ball team. Tim
Tebow in the first year. He had Chris Leak, and he brought Tim Tebow in there a little bit. But you look at the different quarterbacks that he had at Ohio State. They had, he came in there. I think Braxton Miller was the quarterback, but they ended up moving him to wide receiver.
They had Haskins,
Cardell Jones, I believe it was, and then after Cardell Jones, who they have? They had.
I'm going by NFL success.
I'm not saying he's a quarterback developer, but he did a good job with the quarterbacks. I mean, these quarterbacks all played very well at a very high level for him. I mean, he got a lot of quarterbacks drafted very, very high. Now, Cardell Jones didn't get drafted high. He kind of bounced around a little bit. But the kid that's over there right now in Pittsburgh, I can't think of his name right now.
Dwayne Haskins.
Dwayne Haskins got drafted very high. And then, he didn't get an opportunity. I don't think he didn't get an opportunity to coach Justin Fields, but Yeah, I think he was. Was he there when Justin Fields decided to
No,
there? No,
no,
he'd already
he had
left.
he had left. Ryan Day, I think either was
But
in
they had
there a
JT
year or
Barrett.
two.
You know, they had
They
JT
did.
Barrett there as well, and you know, he utilized their skill sets. What I'm saying is, he was able to utilize the different skill sets of each one of them. JT Barrett, you know, JT Barrett's a different kind of quarterback than Cardell Jones was. Cardell Jones is a different kind of quarterback than Dwayne
Right.
Haskins. I mean, he utilized the skill sets of their quarterbacks, and they were very successful.
And I think Haskins still has an opportunity to make an impact in the league too, because like it was an unfair deal in Washington. I mean, he didn't help himself, but he's in Pittsburgh now, where he at least has an opportunity to be successful, knowing the environment and knowing
But Pittsburgh's ready to win right now. They don't
Right.
need to wait. They can't wait on Dwayne Haskins, and they don't. You know, whether he's mature now or what, we don't know.
I don't think Pittsburgh is ready, because Pittsburgh's is trying to prolong a long rebuild after Ben goes, and that with the salary cap. I really don't think they're
Eric,
ready.
okay,
Pittsburgh is ready to win
yeah,
now.
no, Eric, I'm sorry. Mel and I are ganging up on you this time. Okay. You can say what you want. Mike Tomlin doesn't have losing seasons, number one. And number two, I have a feeling the Roonies are going to find a way to get a quarterback some way or another. That's either, if it's not through the draft. Okay. They'll find a experienced quarterback. But let's stay on point here. Okay. Because I really do want to stay on point. And that's this. We're talking Jacksonville right now, and having covered quite a few football games up there. And I saw the energy level when they got to the playoffs and took it all the way the AFC Championship game.
Jacksonville.
This is a small community. It really is one of the smallest markets in the National Football League. No, they may not get another Super Bowl again in terms of hosting it, because you can't promise a bunch of cruise ships and expect to have enough lodging, although it was a great sales pitch. And I enjoyed covering that Super Bowl, even when the Patriots beat the Eagles. We're not pitching the Super Bowl here. But I'm going to tell you right now, though, having covered a lot of football games in that particular market, okay, it won't take a lot for the fan base to get enthusiastic. Okay. I'm telling you, I might have been a little sarcastic earlier that we're setting the bar high when you've got one winning coach out of the rest, although Del Rio was close, and yet they're 7-7 in the playoffs. But if this team can win 5 or 6 games, they'll be doing half cartwheels. And if they do even more than that, they'll do full cartwheels. Okay.
I think this team can. I mean, they got Trevor Lawrence, who I think could still be great. Because remember, Peyton Manning started off pretty rough too.
Well, I mean, but you also have to understand Travis Etienne, okay, got hurt last year, and I think the jury's still out on them. And again, it'll be interesting to see who the offensive coaches are as this thing goes on. But I think Jacksonville, again, you know, they've been through a lot of hard times. And I'll reiterate 9 million times, it ain't going to take much to get a statue outside of there if they have some sustained success. I think this is a good football market waiting to explode. But they need, I mean, with all due respect to Shad Khan, he's a very patient owner who isn't hands-on, and he wants to try to delegate and get his football people in there. There's a couple kinds of different owners. You're going to have patient owners that hire the wrong people, or the ones that are active that are, you know, and but what way do you go? You know, and you get it wrong for so long. And I don't want to turn this into an all like who to hire, because I'm not a human resource guy. But that Jacksonville job there, if Doug Pederson does anything good over there, this guy's got a lifetime contract with this organization. They play internationally. They play out in London usually every year. So they're a worldwide brand as well. So they have money coming in. So I think at least they were smart enough, bulky or no bulky, that you can't mess up Trevor Lawrence. You can't. Okay, you make one
excuse me for interrupting.
Sure.
I like the hire Peterson made for his passing game coordinator. He hired Jim Bob Cooter,
right,
who worked with Peyton Manning and Matthew Stafford.
Right.
You know, I think that's a good hire. You know, I think, you know, he's a guy that will help him, you know, create some plays that play to Lawrence's strength. And I liked what Peterson said right off the bat, that his first, you know, actions as a head coach is going to be surrounding Lawrence with, you know, talented playmakers. So that gives you an idea of what they're going to be doing in the draft coming up.
Well, he knows what the league is all about, for crying out loud. And he's been in it forever, worked under Andy Reid as well. And he's worked with the Packers as a backup. So the guy comes in with incredible credentials.
Starter at one point.
Well, yeah, well, whatever. He was worked with the Packers, Chiefs, and he won a Super Bowl against Tom Brady. I mean, I can't remember the last time the Jaguars made a hire with that much credibility to begin with. I mean, he knows it's not a quick fix, but he's in the right place. He really is. Okay.
You could argue the Coughlin hire was a hire of credibility. Granted, it didn't end well, but still, he did some good things while he's over there. We can't overlook that.
Well, he did, but you can't encourage a culture, Eric, where you're finding everybody every 2 seconds and you create a negative work culture. Or the Players Association, they're going to tell you don't sign there as a free agent. That's a bad place to go. And then you start developing a reputation which is toxic, and you know how that turned out. Tom Coughlin wasn't meant to be an executive. He's meant to be a head football coach. But you know what? I give Shad Khan credit. Hey, I went back to a guy that had a lot of success early in this organization. Why not give him a shot? Well, the early results weren't bad, but over the course of a long haul, you just can't keep chasing your best players out the door where they all want to leave. Jalen Ramsey is gone, and a lot of other guys are shipped out of there. But we're talking about the present, not the past, okay? And it's up to Doug Peterson to not only have a good, strong draft. Of course, it doesn't hurt you have the number 1 pick in the draft, but the Jaguars are smart. You bring in an offensive lineman, the best one you've got out there. And then, like you said, Steve, surround them with more playmakers, wide receivers, running backs. Then before long, those couple of wins that the Jaguars had, you have 5 or 6 wins, hopefully in your first year under Peterson, and it's a starting point. But again, you need wide receivers. You need a guy to protect Lawrence. And I'll go back what I mentioned for those of you guys that were joining us earlier. Okay, that Trevor Lawrence's numbers during his first year. Okay, he throws 12 touchdowns against 17 interceptions. We're at 3,641 yards. There's no reason to think that those numbers can't change a great deal with a bit more discipline and a guy that's played the position. And yes, Steve, you're right. Okay, Jim Bob Cooter. I saw what he did with Detroit and a lot of other places. He was head coaching material for a while, and then, but he's still in the league, and he's a fine, young, bright offensive mind. So, I hate to use the
Didn't
word.
Stafford go to the Pro Bowl the year?
First,
I believe
yes.
he did. Yeah.
He was probably
right.
I think also with Detroit, he was the offense. He was with Stafford when Detroit went to the playoffs.
Yeah, he was an alternate. Yeah, Jim Bob was there when Caldwell was there, if I'm not mistaken. And
Yeah,
then
you're right,
once
Mel.
Caldwell got let go, I think Jim Bob Cooter was the interim coach, if I'm not mistaken.
No, I don't think. I do not believe he was an interim coach. But I can tell you right now, the Chicago Bears wanted to interview Jim Bob Cooter for their offensive coordinator alliance tournament because they did not want him to be in the division. So they denied that. I believe it was a lateral move. I'm not going to get into a Jim Bob Cooter story, but the Bears were coveting him. The Lions denied any kind of interview request at that particular time.
I never was a big fan of Jim Bob Cooter because they didn't run the football.
Right.
It's a different league now. The leagues could become very much more is a passing league. In order to win this league now, you can't just have a Walter Payton or a Ricky Williams.
I'm saying they didn't run the football at all. That's all they did was pass.
Well,
That's all they did. They relied so much on Matthew Stafford that it was too much for them. I mean, they didn't try to run the football at all. I'm saying you got to at least be able to try to run the football. Now you look at the teams that are in the Super Bowl right now. They run the football.
Right.
They run it well.
Their biggest problem though is they had a hard time for the longest time getting a running back. They never had that guy during their time there. They tried Amir Abdullah, who's become kind of a knockaround now.
Well, he's down in Tampa Bay now.
I believe the last I heard he was in Minnesota. But here, let's
he's a kick returner now.
Yeah, let's talk about a couple running. Let's talk about a couple running backs, okay? And first of all, Kevin Smith, okay, out of Central Florida, was a guy that had over 2,000 yards, was injury prone. Javid Best was a concussion issue, and then of course
he was damaged goods when they drafted him.
Well, right,
yeah, he was very injury prone.
Well, all right, but you had a lot of guys. You had Javid Best, Amir Abdullah, and then you had Kevin Smith. So it's not like they didn't try. They were attempting to find a running game, but the problem was all these guys are, like you say, Mel, damaged goods.
They had the guy that they drafted out of Auburn in the second round.
Yeah,
his name.
Yeah, I know who you're talking
But
about.
but really though, honestly, they did not really try to run the football. They had LeGarrette Blount there, I think, for a minute, if I'm not
Right.
mistaken.
Yeah.
They just did not try to run the football. They had Adrian Peterson there, if I'm not mistaken. They just didn't try to run the football. It's just not something that they really tried to do. And they weren't very good at it, to say the least. I mean, they weren't very good at it. So that's probably one of the reasons why they didn't do it.
I think if he would have had if they would have had the back that if they would have had the back, I think it would have gone over better for Jim Bob Cooter, because they were trying to find that back. They tried some free agent, like I think Adrian Peterson, by the time he got there, he was starting to kind of, except for like the resurgence in Washington, he was washed up by then. And then, Kevin Smith was like, as you said, Kevin Smith was just injury prone. Plus he only had like one good year in the league.
I'm just saying from what I've seen with Jim Bob, he doesn't like to run the football. Hopefully, getting there with Doug, maybe Doug will be a little bit more forceful and say, hey, we've got to run the football, because that's something that they did do in Philadelphia, is they ran the ball pretty well.
Yep. They also used multiple quality backs, which they were able to discover backs like Boston Scott in that offense.
Running the football is more of a mindset than anything. And an offensive lineman, they'd much rather be going forward than going backwards. But it's really a mindset. And a lot of it has to do with, blocking schemes as well. And it's a want to thing. And if the coach is not committed to it, the players aren't going to be committed to it. You've got to be committed to it. When I played with the Rams, John Robinson, what he likes to do. He likes to run the football. Now, we threw the ball extremely well because we had Ernie Zampese, and he came from that Don Coryell tree. So we threw the ball very well. But John Robinson wanted to run the football, student body right, student body left, counter tray, gap, all that kind of stuff, stretch, belly. John Robinson wanted to run the football, and Greg Bell, who was a running back at that time, he went to the Pro Bowl, but as did Jim Everett.
And by the way, Mel, the Auburn running back that you're referring to is Kerryon Johnson. So
correct.
Kerryon Johnson.
I never was high on him. I was never high on him, but he was injury prone too.
Yeah, well, again, we just talked about 4 guys. It's not like the Lions haven't tried to go out there and get running backs. And Arto Spinner was a kid out of Kentucky that was a 4th round pick as well.
I'm not going to go with that, because look, how does San Francisco find running backs?
Well, all right.
How do the Rams find? How do other teams find running backs?
The Shanahan zone run game has worked for years.
Okay. Scheme and attitude. They run the football to be able to open up the running game. That's what Shanahan does. They run the football to open up the passing game, rather, and that play action passing game. But it's an attitude. They have the zone scheme that been around forever, and it doesn't take. It takes a lot of practice to do that. We did the zone scheme as well when I was with the Rams, and it takes a lot of practice to do it. And the running backs have to know it's just one cut, and you get north and south.
Well, the thing that we have to keep in perspective here, though, is I know how important the running back game is. And from a Jacksonville standpoint, James Robinson has to be efficient in the backfield, okay? And I believe that's the one thing that Urban Meyer was guilty of, okay, why you keep him on the field. And then Raquel Armstead, who I saw at the end of the year, was a guy they drafted a couple of years ago, came back, looked pretty good. I remember talking to him during the post-game media availability, and Travis Etienne. So if you can get those 3 guys working, okay, again, we're like you said, Mel, you're trying to make sure you can get a running game going so you don't have as much pressure on your wideouts and your tight ends. So again, all these guys are going in with a clean slate. Raquel Armstead gets a shot, and I saw that he pretty good skills there. James Robinson, why you sat him, Urban, is beyond my wildest sort of imagination. And Travis Etienne could be the wild card out of Clemson. You have 3 pieces, who they're going to draft this year as well. I think there's probably some good running backs. But the key is whether or not Doug Pederson, okay, can find some playmakers around him and offensive linemen and tight ends. That's what you need to do first. And if you can do anything, again, the standard isn't high there. You've got one coach with a career of 500 record or above, and Tom Coughlin, and that was the first one. with a 531 percentage at 68-60. Nearly took them to the Super Bowl. They're one of 4 teams that's never been to the Super Bowl. So the bottom line is how did it work out with Jacksonville? I think you said it earlier, Mel. Okay. The Doug Pederson hire is a very, very, very safe hire. I don't think you can go wrong, but I also feel too, though, the Jaguars are not done beefing up their front office to get more football voice in the building. I know they've talked to Rick Spielman. They'll probably open up a lot more candidates now that they're looking at other positions because they have to comply with the Rooney Rule. So I don't think we've heard the end. Well, you do. I've been following up that there are other positions that, as you, Mel, realize, Steve and Eric, that if they decide to look at more executive positions, we're back to the Rooney Rule. And we all know about the problems that we've had with the Rooney Rule in the last week in wake of the Brian Flores situation. I don't have to get into that. So there will be more good football minds in that building, but they had to start with Doug Pederson. And again, he was a safe move all the way around. If I were going to predict a win total for Jacksonville next year, and I know it's very premature without free agency right now in the draft, I would say that the Jaguars should win 5 to 6 games next year. And that's not a lot. It's a small improvement considering how many games they won in a season which is filled with disarray. I can tell you during that media session at the end of the game that Trevor Lawrence, Darrell Bevel, Marvin Jones, these guys were relieved to get out of there and that they kept that locker room together despite everything that they went through. Can you imagine with all the Jaguars need right now in 22 is 2 words, ready guys? Competent leadership. I'm setting the bar at competent leadership. Okay. And then you go from there. But
I think Jacksonville was, I thought Jacksonville was, I thought they did the right thing with the hire. I mean, you couldn't go with an unproven coordinator. You couldn't do another experiment like they did with Urban Meyer, where it could either could defy all odds, or it could go completely south, which it went a little further than south. I think you had to do the right thing by getting a guy who's been a head coach before. That's just where they're at, and I believe Peterson can be that guy. He got Philadelphia. He got the Eagles over the hump. He got Carson Wentz playing at an MVP level, which, in all honesty, Carson Wentz is like, he's not good, but at the time, I mean, the injury probably had something to do with it. But Peterson early on had him playing at an MVP level.
An MVP level where people thought he was going to be the MVP before he got hurt.
He probably would have been had he not gotten hurt.
Well, everybody's talking about Byron Leftwich in this show. Can I tell you where I think he's going to ultimately go? And I want every one of you to give me an opinion on this. I think Byron Leftwich could be the future head coach of the Tampa Bay Bucks. That's what I think. That he's actually
either him or Todd Bowles. I mean,
right. Either of those two guys. Right. Either Todd Bowles or Byron Leftwich could be the heir apparent to Bruce Arians. That's what I think. Okay.
If I'm Bruce, I'm one and done without Tom. If I even coach 1 year without Tom.
Right, but I'm just talking about Byron Leftwich at the moment, a guy that was considered a candidate for this job. So if he, so I could see him ultimately the head coach of the Bucs. Steve, what do you think?
That's a distinct possibility because I don't think Bruce Arians is around for much longer anyway.
I don't think
so. I thought, the Jaguars' job would be a perfect opportunity for Leftwich to, become a head coach. He played there. He's well known by the fan base. He's very respected. And I just thought, he would have been a really good fit for their young quarterback. But I think you make a good point. I mean, with Arians probably coaching 1 more year, I think he'd be the odds-on favorite to take over.
I don't think that actually Jacksonville needed a coach right now that had no NFL head coaching experience. That's my feeling about the whole thing. And they needed a guy that had it. And it was proven. Again, we don't know what Leftwich is going to do. I think he eventually will be a good head coach. Another year of seasoning behind Arians. But you could go. Everybody can judge these hirings now when they happen, and then a year from now, oops, did we make a mistake? Well, at least you're not making a cataclysmic mistake like you did with Meyer, because we all know how that turned out. Go ahead,
Well,
Eric.
Yeah, that's
Jacksonville,
experience.
Jacksonville was, Jacksonville had to kind of go with somebody who had been a head coach before. They
Right.
could not go with the flash hire of flashy coordinator or another experiment. They just couldn't do it. The fan base wouldn't let them, except for maybe Byron Leftwich, because he was their franchise quarterback at one point, and right before he got benched for David Garrard. But they couldn't just, aside from him, they couldn't really. They couldn't hire the flashy coordinator aside from maybe Byron Leftwich, and they couldn't go with another experiment. The media wouldn't let them. The fans wouldn't let them. And I'm sure Shad Khan didn't want to know. Shad Khan's so scarred from the Urban Meyer experience, he wasn't going to let him.
Well, let me tell you this, okay? And Steve and I have been covering this game a long time. I understand that fans are customers. I get it. They're important. But I'm not one that really cares about a fan base or the media, okay? You're the owner. You're going to deal with the repercussions either way. I realize your customers. It's your responsibility to do the best you can to get the hire right. And let me tell you something. Get the hire right. Do as much research on these candidates. And you know what? Because I got news for you. If you got 70,000 general manager in a stadium, tell me how many of them wouldn't make the same mistake anyway. So sorry, fans out there. I'm probably not scoring any points with you. I'm not worried about fan bases. I'm not worried about media markets. Get the hire right to the best of your ability, and know full well that if you're in a small market, you don't have to deal with as many people like me. Okay. So you might have a little bit more room to make mistakes.
Well, this is the type of hire too that you can't really, even let's just say it does go south, you can't really say, oh, I saw it coming. No, the only ones you could really say you saw this, oh man, this is going to end poorly, was when A, Rich Kotite comes back to the New York Jets. Also B, when Matt Patricia took over the Patriots, and then also when Adam Gase somehow got a second chance after getting fired by the Dolphins.
Oh, Matt Patricia was definitely no hit in Detroit, because you're stepping in the hands of Jim Caldwell. We'll talk about that in another program. I actually thought Caldwell was a good option, but I don't think they could have gone wrong with either Jim Caldwell or Doug Pederson. I think either hire, as Mel would say, was safe. So I think that we've done a pretty good job touching it. So I'm going to go around the horn, so to speak, and give every one of you guys some final thoughts about the hire per se. And you know what, Eric, we're going to lead off with you. Give me some your final observations about the Doug Pederson hire in Jacksonville.
I think it was the hire that they had to make. Here's a guy who has a Super Bowl ring, had the Eagles made the Eagles one of the more consistent teams in football, even in spite of Carson Wentz's antics. He still had them going to the playoffs and still getting big wins in December. I think it was a hire you had to make. It was the right hire. I mean, was it safe? Yes, but it's the type of situation where your franchise is at the rock bottom, more lower than the Titanic. You had to make the safe hire, and I believe they did.
All right, Steve, what do you think?
Well, I think Peterson has his work cut out for him. And he knows it. I mean, you're looking at a team that, they have their quarterback. I think what they'll do now, they have the number one pick in the draft. I think they'll probably end up sliding back and getting more draft capital. They can add more pieces, because for him to slide back 10 or 12 spots, you're still going to get a real high quality draft pick. They don't need to, have the number one pick in the draft. I think that gives them some opportunity to move around. And if they're smart, that's what they'll do. I mean, start building around your quarterback. And I totally agree, because with what Mel said earlier, running the football is a mentality. And I think they need to do that. The best way, and I think Peterson's smart enough to know this, the best way to protect a young quarterback is to run the football, because you're not putting too much pressure on him, which they did this year. And I think if you run the football well, it puts your quarterback more at ease, and it gives him much more, makeable situations when it comes to down and distance. And I think that's what it comes down to. You know, Peterson, even if he only wins 5 games this year, if they're competitive in all their football games, you know, regardless of what their record is, because they know they're a long ways off. But if they're competitive in almost all their games, that fan base is going to be very excited. And I think that's what you need to do. And it's going to be a long rebuild. It's going to take more than 1 or 2 years. But I think he can do it. He wouldn't have been the first pick for me, but you know, that's who the Jaguars went with. And, you know, I think he can do a good job there. I think he'll be fine. It's just they need to hit on their draft picks. They need to hit on their free agents and build a team, build a cohesive team. And I think that if they do all that, they'll be on the right track again.
All right, Mel, what are your thoughts about the Peterson hire?
I think it was a safe hire. I think it was a conservative hire. I think that, there are, Steve brings up a good point as far as the draft is concerned, but typically teams don't really trade up unless they're trying to get a quarterback. And there's really not that guy in the draft this year that people feel they need to move up for and get them, and that could change the fortunes of their franchise. You build the team. They got to build the team from the inside out. They got to build the team from, on the offensive line, defensive line. They have to build it from the trenches. And, to trade up, to think that somebody might trade up for, Aiden Hutchinson. I don't know. It'd be great if somebody was really that high on them and they could move back a little bit, because then they could get a lot of really good players. That's all that's going to do is help their franchise, and they can really solidify the offensive and defensive lines. But to pass up, a pass rusher, and there's other pass rushers, that are, there's another pass rusher at the University of Michigan. I mean, there's other pass rushers out there. There's a kid from Oregon as well that that is very highly rated. So if they are able to, if somebody really is in love with Aiden Hutchinson, who everyone seems to think is going to be the number 1 overall pick, I'd be more than happy to do away with that number 1 pick and slide back a few picks and get some draft picks, get some great draft picks, so that I can get some great players, get them in my system, develop them, and hopefully do some great things with them. But as far as as Doug, like I said, I just think he was a safe hire. He's a made man. He's not only been in the Super Bowl, he won one. He did it recently. He did it with a quarterback who was a franchise quarterback. The great problem that he has is he doesn't have to worry about who his quarterback's going to be. He's not looking to the draft to find out, try to find his next quarterback. He knows who his quarterback's going to be. So now all they got to do is just put the pieces around him.
Yeah, that's what made that job attractive to even Urban Meyer. You have the number 1 pick of the draft. You have Trevor Lawrence, franchise game-changing quarterback. But yeah, I have absolutely no problem with the hire. I think Doug Pederson will be a pretty good job. I'll go back to what Steve said, okay, that if you keep them competitive at 5 or 6 wins, you're going to do well. I'll tell you what, in Jacksonville, keep a team competitive with 5 or 6 wins, and you're putting 50, 60,000 people in the stands. You do much more than that. Then you have traffic jams that are long. So I think that Jacksonville's a great football town waiting to explode. All they need is they need some good fortune, and more importantly, a coach that is credible, that's been there and done that. And again, they have some pieces there. I really do. And I don't think you can go wrong with either that hire or Jim Caldwell. But I'm happy for Doug Pederson. And if he's the one guy in NFL history that could win a Super Bowl in 2 places, boy, can you imagine what that will do for his legacy, winning one in Philadelphia, Steve, first Super Bowl title there, and then all of a sudden getting Jacksonville not even in the Super Bowl, winning. To me, that is almost the equivalent to winning, and I'm going to go back to Boston here a little bit, but I don't want to drag it on much longer. But what Kurt Schilling won a world championship is there in Arizona and ended up winning one in Boston. To me, guys that are drought busters, that gives some people to think a little bit. But Doug has an opportunity to go out there and win a Super Bowl in 2 places. Not even Don Shula or Jimmy Johnson did that. And you put that in perspective, it's unreal. Bill Parcells didn't even do it.
Came
But
close.
yet, Doug, what's that?
Came close.
Yeah, but that only, but what is the old saying? Comes close anywhere but in, what is it?
Horseshoes and hand
There you
grenades.
go. There you go. So we're gonna leave it at that. But meanwhile, great opportunity to talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars and Doug Pederson. I'm glad that everybody had some very candid, knowledgeable opinions about the subject. I really do believe that the organization could be headed in the right direction. They just have to make sure everybody in the front office is on the page, and they get some. And the draft, they have to get it right. But Doug Pederson, to me, is in a good spot as long as he doesn't have a boatload of drama like Urban Meyer. I think they should be in pretty good shape. But that said, looking ahead, we have a good broadcast coming up tomorrow, our Super Bowl edition. Eric, I know you won't be here for that one, but Eric did a good job on the baseball show, 108 Stitches Baseball Talk. And of course, Eric will be regular here on Inside the Pigskin. So, all right, Steve, with that said, why don't you let everybody know how they can get a hold of you?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at SteveB7SFG. I write for PatsFans.com. I also write about military and politics as a national security columnist for 1945.com. But you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, all the social media giant platforms there.
Very good. Eric, you're next.
Yes, you can follow me on @SportsTeamNews. That's my Twitter handle. And I also write for BellyUpSports.com. I cover everything Wisconsin Badgers football.
Very good. Mel?
You can find me on all the social media at Mel Farr Jr. Follow what we have going on here in Atlanta and also Detroit at melfarr.org.
We have a lot of great episodes lined up, folks, on Inside the Pigskin. My name is Scott Morganroth, Motor City Madmouth. Looking forward to developing this show, and as well as all the other shows that we have in the system as well. We have the Sports Exchange, we have 108 Stitches Baseball Talk, No Limits, as well as Self for Tribune Podcast. But Inside the Pigskin can be located on Spreaker, as well as our YouTube channel. We'll be adding more and more providers as well. You can also find it on www.southfloridatribune.com, and you can find us on Twitter at Tribune South. So great job by my crew tonight talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars. We'll see how this thing all plays out. But meanwhile, on behalf of my dynamite crew, this is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us on this edition of Inside the Pigskin. We will catch you later. Have a great weekend, folks.